5 minutes ago, Ksenia Sobchak delivered a shocking confrontation with Alla Pugacheва in front of European onlookers, silencing even Maxim Galkin. You won't believe the words Ksenia boldly spoke. Stay tuned to discover the twist that has everyone questioning what they thought they knew. Ksenia entered the elegant Parisian hall not as a mere guest, but as the master of the evening, poised to dictate the mood. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation, reminiscent of a collector unveiling a rare piece of art. The faint shimmer of delicate glasses on the tables caught the light, as if tiny lanterns were hidden within the crystal. The orchestra played warm notes that caressed the air, a soft hum that promised to sweep away the guests' everyday worries. Dressed in a flowing navy gown, Ksenia glided through the room. The fabric draped her figure seamlessly, flowing like a gentle river, while a slender bracelet sparkled with each movement of her wrist. Her hair was elegantly styled, her forehead exposed, revealing a face that radiated an unpretentious honesty. There was no haste in her steps, only a quiet assurance that transformed the space into an expectant stage. Ksenia's gaze pierced through the crowd, reading their feigned smiles before they even registered her presence. Politicians sat at tables, meticulously organized in their thoughts, while actors wore expressions that could weep without shedding tears. Ksenia observed every detail instinctively, the pins adorned with tiny flags on lapels, shadows of fatigue on cheeks, and the bitterness in rehearsed speeches. She knew these elements would be crucial. Like the perfect backdrop against which she would carve out the night's narrative. A striking gentleman, his hair streaked with silver, announced Pugacheва, whose name alone had the power to command an audience's attention across nations. The room straightened, as if the very air thickened with her presence. People who had previously flicked through the evening's program now gathered forward, leaning in as if sharing an intimate secret. Pugacheva took the stage, and the light seemed to bend towards her, eager to illuminate her figure in a gown the color of warm champagne, twinkling with sequins. Her familiar features brought forth nostalgia, like a beloved photograph. With a deep breath, she prepared to speak, her first words in English soft yet cautious, echoing like tentative steps on polished wood. But the complicated syntax resisted her attempts, her focus waning as she stumbled, self-doubt creeping in. The audience exchanged glances, sensing the shift in energy. The English language became an emotional maze for Pugacheva, leading her away from logic. With resentment bubbling to the surface, she pivoted, delving into the essence of her message, articulating the weight of her experience, the sacrifices made by those who remained, and the courage to voice uncomfortable truths. Ksenia remained still, acutely aware of Pugacheva's faltering words, concerned not only for the icon but for the greater implications of her struggle. As Pugacheva attempted to regain her footing, Ksenia felt an internal tug towards something powerful, fearlessly calling for authenticity in a world filled with facades and illusions. In that pivotal moment, Ksenia's heartfelt insistence echoed through the hall, urging her to embrace her roots. As she interjected, Ksenia's voice found its place, each word deliberate and steady. Alla Borisovna, she urged, let's speak without masks, in your native tongue. To be ashamed of your language is to betray the memories behind every note you've sung. A palpable silence enveloped the space, thick with anticipation. It was a rare kind of silence, one that signaled a deeper understanding. Pugacheva tilted her head slightly, her expression shifting from confusion to introspection. In this moment, Ksenia took a step forward, asserting her intent to connect rather than dominate, to remind everyone of their shared history and responsibilities. Her calm tone held the weight of a collective memory. You were once the voice of the people, she continued, not just metaphorically, but literally. The audience was rapt, reflecting on the truth of her words. Pugacheva's silence spoke volumes, a stark contrast to her earlier words, whispering of a deeper, unshakable truth woven into her very being. Ksenia pressed on, bringing clarity to the confusion, and the room began to shift, not physically, but on a profound level. Those gathered, seeking beauty, suddenly remembered their roots, feeling the gravity of their own responsibility while facing the art they so adored. Ksenia, embodying the spirit of honesty, readied herself for the biggest leap yet. This moment demanded precision. How could she present truths without them dissolving into mere slogans? As the audience listened with bated breath, the air thickened with potential. Ksenia prepared to navigate the terrain of vulnerability. Her figurative climb would lead not to a peak for glory, but to the unveiling of the hard, gritty reality that had long been buried beneath the surface. Ksenia took her place at a round table near the stage. The flickering lights danced atop the tall candelabras. It wasn't merely candlelight, it was the very discipline of fire. Mingling with the rich scent of expensive perfumes was a subtle sweetness reminiscent of burnt sugar, and within this fragrant cloud lay a delicate hint of chrysanthemums, indicating the flowers adorning the stage were fresh. The hall thrummed with freshness, from glances to pretense to applause, feeding on the vibrant energy of the moment. Ksenia nodded to familiar faces. Her name was spoken in a range of tones, some with warmth, others whispering caution. Yet, she remained unfazed, fully aware of her purpose. The event promised a smooth evening, gleaming like a storefront display, but she had never been fond of displays. Such polished facades often concealed fractures beneath the surface. An elegant gentleman, silver-streaked in his hair, stood to announce the main guest, Alla. This name alone had the power to draw curtains in various countries, elongating minutes into something palpable. Like a conductor's silent cue, everyone in the room straightened in unified anticipation. Those who had just moments ago lazily thumbed through the evening's program now held their papers neatly in their laps, reverently, as if placing a hand on a friend's shoulder. As Pugachiva made her entrance, the atmosphere shifted noticeably. The light, concentrated upon her, seemed to cascade like a gentle waterfall, yearning to accentuate her every move. Draped in a gown the color of warm champagne, it shimmered with tiny sequins that sparkled like dewdrops at dawn. Her face, familiar to many like a cherished family photograph, bore a soft oval with defined eyes that still glimmered with the lingering fire of her touring years. As she raised her hand, the microphone cradled in her palm, she inhaled, preparing to address the crowd. Her first words emerged in English, cautious and delicate, like a tentative step on a new floor. But this unfamiliar language offered no urgency to flow. The accents veered unexpectedly, and the syntax played coy. What had been a prepared statement transformed into a tangled knot of confusion. Pugachiva stumbled as if caught on an invisible step, exhaling a sigh of unease while attempting to mask it with a smile, introducing a Russian interjection that inadvertently laid bare her uncertainty. Eyes darted around the room, an unspoken dialogue sparked among the guests. The foreign language twisted into a labyrinth, forcing her to navigate through emotions rather than logic. Anguish surfaced, transforming her discourse. Unwillingly, she spoke of the artists driven away, the courage of choice, and the unshakable truth that should never be whispered. Her words fluctuated, sometimes rushing forth, at other times hesitant, yet eventually, she earned the first soft claps of support. Ksenia noted the hesitations, the subtle shadows of doubt on the faces surrounding her, as they began to grasp the underlying gravity of the situation. How would they respond as the spotlight shifted? Was the truth as simple as a song, or was it a complex tapestry woven through silence and resilience? The tension crackled in the air. Just moments ago, a well-known figure stumbled as she spoke in English. Her words faltered, and an unfamiliar hesitation flashed across her face. That small slip revealed a deeper crack beneath the polished surface. The crowd exchanged glances, her English had turned into a confusing maze. It wasn't reason or grammar guiding her, but raw emotion, hurt. That feeling settled heavily into the room, setting the stage for what came next. With renewed resolve, she shifted from faltering phrases to the core of her message. Her voice gained weight, carving through the crowd's attention like a blade. Russia is not what it used to be, she asserted. Artists were pushed away. Freedom was replaced by watchful eyes. She spoke of those who left, the courage it took, the right to choose one's own path, and the truth that cannot safely whisper in silence. Her words surged unevenly, sometimes rushing, sometimes halting, but they ignited applause. The audience thanked her, honored the legend she spoke of, recalled memories so ingrained that the sound of her name was like a cherished melody to parents long ago. Yet the applause soon faded as quickly as a sudden rain, leaving fragile silence between her sentences. Uncertainty hung in the air. Sitting still, eyes fixed, Ksenia watched. She never enjoyed witnessing a great figure tangled in their own stardom's snares. But today, the issue wasn't clumsiness. Behind the voice on stage, she recognized more than a mere jab. It was an attempt to drape a heavy black veil over a country and call it bravery. That feeling, a fierce, quiet flame, kindled within Ksenia. It was the feeling she kept to herself, the one felt by those who can't roar loudly and thus become targets of stronger voices. She caught the wary glance of Maxim a few seats away. He braced, as if awaiting a verbal attack from an invisible corner, shrinking slightly with the weight of looming embarrassment. He was used to the stage, but not to being the outsider here. The woman continued, this time slipping back into Russian, the sharp words cutting through the English like a scalpel, now without a hint of a smile. A glass whistled sharply in the stillness. Someone clumsily set it down on marble, a hollow clink sounding like a glass fork slicing the silence. Without a dramatic flourish, Ksenia raised her hand, not to perform, but to signal intent. She stood up, and though the motion was simple, the entire room seemed to shift pitch. Jewelry softly chimed. A hush fell as a few stopped rustling their programs, heads turned abruptly then quickly masked their curiosity with innocent gestures. Human truth hides in such subtle movements. We all pretend earnestly. Ksenia didn't reach for the microphone. Her voice alone was enough to command the space. In the previous segment, Ksenia maintained her composure as her words cut deep, devoid of loudness yet resonating with strength. Those in the audience felt a shift, as if tuning in to a profound truth. They were reminded of their collective roots and the harsh realities enveloping their country. Only the essence remained, the memories binding them together. Your Name once promised sold-out shows when fans lined up with thermoses in hand. In Soviet halls and the vast squares of Russia, your music healed the cracks of daily life. The nation remembers. It isn't flawless, but it is ours. If you intend to speak to it directly, do so without hiding behind foreign words. A language different from your own will never lend authenticity to your thoughts. In those moments, Ksenia sensed a collective shift in the room, a stirring beyond mere chairs or a glorious stage, a deeper understanding ignited within the attendees. They arrived seeking an evening of beauty but instead found a profound lesson in responsibility, one that surpassed any expectation of entertainment. She wasn't in a rush to conclude her thoughts. Inside her, an unmistakable feeling brewed, one that often nudges at the heart when words finally resonate with their rightful audience. Pugacheva stood silent. Her quietude rang louder than any convoluted English she had previously attempted. It wasn't a sign of weakness, but rather a reclaiming of the Russian essence resonating from her vocal depths. Ksenia offered a small nod, recognizing the honesty in the pause that followed, no triumphant gestures, just a stark reminder of the importance of maturity. In that instant, the audience exhausted from hollow niceties inhaled a sincere speech, the air thick with authenticity. She felt her bracelet catch the light, a tiny spark that flickered only to dissolve again, carrying its own weight of significance. It is not the adornment that empowers the hand but what it holds. A journalist lurking in the back focused intently on the stage. Ideas for a future article began to crystallize in his mind. In Paris, they remembered that honesty can whisper powerfully without shouting. Nearby, a camera held its breath, recording the moment, yet the operator kept the lens low, respecting the ambience. Ksenia inhaled deeply, neither exhaustion nor euphoria clouded her clarity, only the resolve to confront the tough part ahead, where truth must be spoken plainly, ensuring that the word truth doesn't ring as mere rhetoric. She climbed this heightened moment, step by step, like a climber scaling a precarious slope, preparing for what lay beyond the summit, the reality that awaited her. Just moments ago, she drew in a breath, neither tired nor exhilarated, only steady, clear focus. She knew the hardest part was still ahead. The moment where words would have to be sharp, precise, not slogans or empty claims. Step by step, like a climber scaling a rocky cliff, she prepared herself for the peak. This was no selfie spot. It was the vantage point where true terrain reveals itself. As the hall settled into a new silence, she shifted slightly backward, not retreating, but gathering strength for what was coming next. That subtle step spoke volumes: restraint, control, respect. She wasn't here to dominate or humiliate but to invite a deeper conversation. Across from her stood a woman who was more than just a star, she was a symbol. And so, the challenge should be demanding, but honorable. The atmosphere changed, not physically, but in focus and tension. In Alla's eyes flickered a look only directors know, the moment an actor finally tunes out their own rehearsed echoes and truly hears the audience for the first time in ages. This wasn't surrender or agreement. It was the raw moment of listening. She locked eyes with Maxim sitting a bit apart. His gaze revealed a storm inside, the urge to protect, confusion, and the sharp edge of countless verbal battles. But tonight was different. This was not a duel of words to score points. It was about building a home, something real, something lasting. Where many expected controversy and spectacle, she chose precision. Where applause usually burst out immediately, she demanded silence. In this hush, a message could land solidly. In the noise, it would scatter like dust. She prepared herself for the conversation she came here to have. A night meant to shine turned into a mirror reflecting more than glitter. The pause after her statement stretched unbearably long. Alla gripped the microphone with both hands, her lifeline and cane, steadying herself. Her eyes scanned the crowd, seeking allies. Smiles flickered. Nods hovered. Eyelids fluttered. But the faces bore no trace of the old reverence. Instead, their eyes held anticipation. They weren't waiting for excuses or rehearsed lines, they demanded a real response. Suddenly, Alla's fragile English burst out before she could catch herself. A stuttering confession. I wanted to say, it hurts. The pain in her voice was undeniable. Pain at witnessing the country where she once sang now slowly unravel before her words again slipped, breaking into scattered fragments. Would she find the strength to own this silence, or would the cracks deepen? Just moments ago, a tense silence filled the room. Everyone waited, not for excuses, but for a real answer from the legendary diva. Her English sentence stumbled out before her native words could gather themselves. She tried to breathe, to steady herself. It hurts, she whispered. It hurts to see the country where I once sang, slipping through my fingers once more. Yet, that fragile vulnerability, which once moved hearts, now felt different, less like revelation, more like uncertainty. Ksenia stayed silent, standing slightly off to the side. But her shadow fell heavily over the stage, turning this monologue into a conversation. Sensing the shift, Alla Pugacheва quickened her pace, her voice rising. Russia has changed. She spoke of a land where honest voices no longer have a place, where they are silenced and pushed away. We left because there was no other choice. You cannot sing when the song is strangled. Her words echoed through the hall, but applause did not follow. The crowd listened with bated breath, waiting for what would come next. Then, Ksenia moved forward, no microphone, no theatrics. Her voice was low, but firm, reaching every corner. Alla Borisovna, she said calmly, no one strangled your song. The only one suffocating it is yourself, by refusing to sing for your own people. Silence deepened. You were never chased away. You were awaited. You would have been welcomed anywhere, on any square. But you chose to leave and blame the country instead of standing with it during hard times. Her words landed with grave weight. In Pugacheva's eyes, a familiar spark flared, not an artist's fire, but a human one. The spark of hurt. She opened her mouth to reply, but Ksenia gave no chance to interrupt. Remember the Soviet years, Ksenia continued. Who made you a prima donna? The people who waited for hours in line for tickets. The people who gave their last ruble to see your concert. The ones who believed your voice was part of their lives. All your wealth, palaces, yachts, it's a gift from that country you now call a prison. A cold wave seemed to ripple through the crowd. Some nodded, others lowered their heads. Even those unfamiliar with the complexities of Russian life could feel the undeniable truth pounding through Ksenia's words. Just then, in the dim corner where Maxim Galkin sat quietly, something stirred. He lifted his head as if preparing to intervene. His eyes darted from his wife to Ksenia. He opened his mouth, but at that exact moment, Ksenia caught his gaze. Her look was not angry, but resolute. What happened next could change everything in this charged room. Would Maxim speak or retreat? The tension was suffocating, and the real confrontation was just beginning. A tense hush filled the room. In a quiet corner, Maxim, until now a silent observer, shifted, as if ready to interrupt. His eyes darted between his wife and Ksenia. He parted his lips to speak, but Ksenia's gaze locked onto him, sharp but controlled. The message was clear, not anger, but a firm command to stay silent. Ksenia addressed him with sudden sharpness. Maxim, she said, you and your wife have both chosen to speak in foreign tongues, trying to charm the crowd. Alla Borisovna stumbles through English, you speak in Ukrainian. And what has it brought you? You lost Russia. You lost your audience. Once a beloved darling of the nation, a shining star of every official celebration, no major broadcast ever passed without his name. Now, he had become a shadow of that former glory. Ksenia's words landed like precise arrows.
Maxim, accustomed to throwing witty jokes and light remarks, found himself without a defense.
His eyes widened, vulnerable like a cornered animal.
Moments later, they dropped in defeat.
His posture curled inward like a guilty dog's.
Shoulders slumped, hands awkwardly folded in his lap.
A ripple spread through the crowd, not laughter, nor applause, but recognition. Masks had slipped.
Names once untouchable now stood disarmed before raw truth.
Still composed, Ksenia delivered the final blow of this exchange.
You don't sell your homeland.
You don't trade it for fancy venues and applause from foreign crowds.
We love our country even when it's hard. It's never a stage for a show. The silence stretched, the kind you could touch. Somewhere.
The soft clink of a glass against a table startled the listeners, instantly regretted. The Parisian audience, accustomed to polished speeches and polite smiles, felt something deeper stir for the first time that evening.
Ksenia didn't smile. Instead, she took a step back, leaving the room to decide where truth lay. Meanwhile, Alla Pugacheва, just moments before commanding the stage, now seemed pushed aside.
She clutched the microphone to her chest, as if it were a fragile shield, thin cardboard peeling and crumbling.
Her face betrayed an inner battle, the flickering of anger, or the weariness of surrender.
She straightened her spine and spoke clearly once more. I always sang for the people.
I lived through them.
But how could I stay where they forbid you to speak the truth?
I couldn't stay silent.
The crowd stirred briefly, a polite applause rising, respect, not passion.
The night's electricity lingered, but what would come next? Would the truth shake this aristocratic assembly to its core? The delicate balance between legend and reality seemed ready to snap.
In Paris, the tension in the room was palpable as Ksenia Sobchak prepared to confront Alla Pugacheва, the iconic singer. It wasn't just a clash of stars, it was a seismic moment that could shift perceptions of patriotism and exile. The atmosphere was electric, heavy with anticipation, as Ksenia finally stepped forward, voice steady and resolute, ready to speak truth to power. I have always sung for the people, lived for them, she began, her voice cutting through the polite applause like a knife.
But how could I remain silent in a place where the truth is forbidden?
The crowd suddenly awakened, a ripple of energy coursing through them as they clapped hesitantly, still grappling with the significance of her words. Yet, in that applause, Ksenia sensed a struggle, a reluctance to let go of the cherished legacy while not wanting to offend the beloved diva. Each clap seemed delicate, as if the fingers barely grazed palms. She deliberately paused, letting it sink in, allowing everyone to hear how applause could vanish faster than it appeared. Truth is not a slogan meant for foreign halls, Ksenia continued, regarding Pugacheва with an unwavering gaze.
Truth is standing beside one's country in its darkest hours. She was relentless.
You could have sung for millions, lifting their spirits as you once did.
Instead, you chose to run away. That is not truth. That's fleeing.
Pugacheva flinched, confusion flickering in her eyes, a rare sight for someone usually poised and confident. She attempted a smile, but it felt forced, extinguished before it could ignite.
Maxim Galkin, sitting beside her,
finally spoke up, though his tone was thin, tinged with dismay.
Ksenia, you can't justify everything happening there. We are not enemies to our people. But Ksenia's reply was calm yet powerful, her words tumbling down like boulders. Maxim, the people did not betray you, you turned your back on them. The country offered you a stage, a chance for glory. And when the hard times came, you decided it was easier to leave and talk about oppression.
But freedom is not about escaping, it's about taking responsibility. As she spoke, the audience felt the shift. In the heart of Paris, a fiery confrontation unfolded.
Ksenia Sobchak, with a piercing clarity, voiced the unsaid truths on behalf of millions.
This is not a betrayal, it's an acknowledgement, she declared, as applause erupted like a thunderstorm. This wasn't mere applause, it was a wave of fervor. People leapt to their feet, hands raised, some shouted bravo. Their voices echoing louder than any song. Amidst it, Alla Pugacheva remained silent, her presence heavy and contemplative. Maxim Galkin sat stiff, his gaze lowered, seeming like a chastised pet. He understood, perhaps, that no excuses would suffice. Sobchak took a definitive step forward. Russia welcomed you. It gave you everything but did not deserve betrayal. The roar of the crowd was different this time, it resonated from the soul.
Initially polite and routine, the applause transformed into a heartfelt recognition, as if everyone understood they were witnessing history. Photographers jumped to attention, their flashes turning fleeting moments into eternal snapshots. Pugachiva looked weary, shoulders slumped. Galkin's complexion had gone pale, like a mask stripped away. Sobchak stood tall and composed, a figure crafted by intention, waiting to emerge. Whispers filled the room as journalists scrambled to document the upheaval.
Some hurriedly typed messages to their editors, capturing the raw nerve of the moment. Others meticulously noted every inflection, understanding that tomorrow's headlines would depend not just on words but on the spirit with which they were spoken.
The atmosphere thickened with movement.
Guests shifted closer,
pointing out Ksenia to each other. An elderly politician, his glasses glinting, murmured almost conspiratorially.
It felt like a parliamentary debate, but grounded in sincerity.
Pugachiva stood on stage, microphone in hand.
But it felt foreign to her now, a relic from a past life. She opened her mouth to speak, but the crowd would not allow her to be heard. Their claps morphed into a roaring murmur, as if everyone was sharing opinions aloud, waiting for their desires to be met. Ksenia remained poised, as if she knew her part had already been fulfilled.
What happens when the silence of the powerful is pierced by the truth of the people? Could this pivotal moment be the spark for change, or a fleeting glimpse of an unyielding past? As this tension hung heavy in the air, what would unfold next, challenging everyone's understanding of loyalty and betrayal?
In this moment of revelation, emotions surged. Ksenia had awakened a long-buried courage within.
Against the echo of applause and the weight of silence, the stage was set for unavoidable reckoning. The unspilled truth began to lay the foundation for tomorrow's dialogue. Would Pugachiva find her voice again, or would the reality of her choices hold her captive?
Just moments ago, the tension filled the grand hall.
Ksenia stood motionless, having already made her point.
The applause had faded into a low murmur, guests sharing their thoughts aloud, restless for the next act. The atmosphere was thick, charged with anticipation, as if the air itself awaited a crack to shatter this uneasy silence.
This was no ordinary evening, something raw was unfolding beneath polished surfaces. Ksenia made no gestures.
She didn't thank the crowd for their applause. Rarely does a speech breathe on its own, without the speaker's aid, yet here, the words had taken on a life of their own. Finally, Maxim Galkin rose, breaking the quiet like a seasoned actor stepping into the spotlight. The sharpness of his step echoed through the room. He snatched the microphone from Ksenia's hand and spoke with fervor. Let's not pretend we've discovered America here. We love Russia, but we cannot accept what's happening.
You talk about loyalty, what kind of loyalty is it to live in fear? We have the right to leave.
We have the right to speak truths where people will listen. His voice cut through the audience, louder than the murmurs, but tinged with desperation. Like bullets fired in a panic, his words flew fast but missed their mark, fading into the cold air rather than striking hearts. Ksenia lifted her gaze quietly but firmly, making sure everyone caught her every word. Maxim, you have always been a master of laughter, yet today, you sound like someone trying to convince himself.
Everyone has the right to leave. But leaving and insulting your country, that's not a right. That's weakness.
The hall erupted again, this time with applause louder than before. People rose from their seats, the clapping pulsing like a heartbeat shaking the room. Maxim fell silent, his face drained of color. He glanced toward Ksenia, but she looked away. In that instant, it was clear the crowd had decided. They weren't siding with legends or familiar names tonight. They sided with unfiltered truth. At last, Alla Pugachiva lifted her head. Her expression was instantly recognizable, the familiar blend of slight mockery and readiness for a sharp reply that millions had seen on television. She stepped to the edge of the stage, took the microphone, and declared, I have never betrayed Russia. I have sung for her all my life. And I have the right to say that it hurts me to see her like this. Was this a confession of betrayal? Or was it honesty laid bare? The room buzzed with mixed reactions. Some applauded out of respect for her past, accustomed to honoring her legacy. Yet others received her words with guarded caution, their faces unreadable. Was it truly honest to leave and then throw stones from afar? The question hung in the air like an icy draft slipping through an open door.
What would come next in a night where loyalties clashed, voices trembled, and the fragile balance of truth and pain began to tip? The story was far from over. In a tense atmosphere charged with anticipation, Ksenia took a step forward. Honesty means standing with those in need, even when it's tough, she proclaimed, her voice cutting through the murmur of the audience. It means performing not only during celebrations, but in moments of weariness when hope feels distant. Each word was like a sharp arrow aimed at the heart of Alla Pugacheва. Doubt flickered across Pugacheva's face as she grasped the weight of Ksenia's challenge. You claim to love Russia, Ksenia continued, her presence commanding attention. But love is not just applauding in Paris, it's about loyalty in Moscow, St. Petersburg, Ekaterinburg, and the smaller towns where people awaited your return. You were never driven away, they still listen to your songs, believing that the voice that once united them will rise again. The hall fell silent, even the waitstaff pausing mid-step, trays suspended in space. Pugacheva, overcome with emotion, lowered her microphone. The fatigue etched on her features mirrored that of a performer who has played to a restless audience, knowing the ovation no longer brings joy. Ksenia encapsulated the moment. Your homeland is not a stage where you pick the best time to perform. It's your duty, and duty cannot be betrayed. Her words resonated like the final chord of a powerful symphony. As Ksenia spoke, the audience erupted in applause, a flood of sound that engulfed the hall. People rose in waves, clapping enthusiastically, some crying out bravo. But this bravo was stripped of its usual admiration, carrying the weight of a deeper significance. Pugacheva remained still, her eyes shimmering under the lights, whether from tears or stage lights was uncertain. Maxim, retreating into his seat, sat frozen, fully aware that the argument had been lost. Ksenia, however, maintained her composure, refraining from raising her hands in triumph or accepting the crowd's accolades as personal victory. She stood erect, embodying a person who had expressed what was necessary, now simply awaiting silence in the aftermath. Was this an act of betrayal or a profound honesty? The evening had turned, the air thick with a shared realization that something larger than mere words had transpired that night. Applause fell away, replaced by a palpable tension, as if the very walls were witnessing a pivotal moment in time. The orchestra, usually quick to fill silence with melody, hesitated, the strings remained untouched, stifled by the weight of unspoken truths. In this strategic stillness, Ksenia sensed the collective breath of the crowd, an acknowledgement of raw emotion that lingered in the air like the scent of distant memories. What lies beneath those layers of fame? Who are we when the applause fades and the lights dim? These questions hung heavy, laden with anticipation. As the crowd finally tired from their applause, the atmosphere shifted. It became thick, electrified with an unspeakable tension. Every breath echoed the realization that something extraordinary had just unfolded, not merely a heated exchange of words. The orchestra, poised to grace the evening with gentle melodies, hesitated. The musicians exchanged glances, lowering their bows in silent agreement. They understood that no music could overshadow the weight of what had been said. Journalists surged forward, eager to capture the moment. Dictaphones stretched out while others furiously typed on their phones, trying to document reactions. Some cameras were already broadcasting live to news outlets. What began as a charitable event in Paris was morphing into a sensational headline: Ksenia versus the prima donna, an onstage scandal. Guests whispered amongst themselves, some fervently engaged as if witnessing a historic trial, while others processed the gravity of the exchange with intense focus, weighing every word of the confrontation. Meanwhile, Alla Pugacheva stood frozen. The microphone dangled limply in her hand, a hollow shell of what it once was. Her eyes were a kaleidoscope of emotions: pride, wounded hurt, exhaustion, and perhaps an inkling of regret or understanding, but not a single word emerged from her lips. Maxim Galkin, spotting the flashing cameras, bowed his head as if seeking refuge from the scrutinizing eyes. This was no act, only a raw and vulnerable wish to vanish. Ksenia, however, remained resolute. She stood tall, a person fully aware that applause fades and headlines lose their significance. Yet the truth spoken will endure. Her gaze didn't seek the cameras or the accolades, instead, it looked beyond the audience, perhaps toward those thousands of kilometers away, the very people for whom her message was intended. As the host attempted to steer the evening back to familiar territory, droning on about the importance of charity and the value of art, his voice rang hollow. What compelled Ksenia to confront such an icon? How does one person summon the courage to challenge a legend, to face the ghosts of their own culture?
As the intrigue thickened in the air, the silence became almost deafening. For Ksenia, it was no mere speech but a deep-seated responsibility.
Would she step back or continue to wield her voice with authority? The crowd held its collective breath, awaiting the reverberations of that moment where one brave soul dared to speak for many. Their reactions were a fusion of shocked disbelief and newfound respect for the unraveling scenario. They were not mere spectators, but participants in an unfolding drama. Would Pugachiva find her voice again, or would Ksenia's words echo in the stillness? As the night wore on, the balance of power shifted, leaving everyone in the hall recalibrating their understanding of truth, responsibility, and the courage it takes to be heard. Just moments ago, Ksenia boldly confronted Alla Pugachiva in front of an audience of Europeans. What she said to the legendary prima donna stunned everyone. Even Maxim Galkin was silenced. Listen closely. Words like these had never dared to be spoken aloud before. The scene was set for a profound reckoning. Previously, the atmosphere had shifted as awkward English faltered on Pugachiva's lips, and the silence grew thick with uncertainty. Now, the words Ksenia delivered bounced off a wall of stillness. No one listened at first. Guests began rising, drawn not by scandal, but by the raw truth they had long feared to voice. Some approached her with quiet gratitude, others with nods of approval. Among them were politicians, business figures, even artists who once kept their distance from Ksenia's sharp tongue. Today, they saw her as a brave force, someone willing to say what hovered unspoken in the air. Ksenia acknowledged each silently, not seeking applause. She embraced the wave as one accepts an inevitable tide. Somewhere deep in the hall, a young journalist recorded every word, realizing this was a moment where truth soared louder than any song. Her steps toward the exit were measured but unwavering, the gait of someone who'd said everything that mattered. Behind her, the room ignited anew. Conversations sparked, debates ignited. Neighbors whispered the revelations just shared. Others reached for cameras and phones, eager to capture history as it unfurled. In the corridor, a throng of reporters gathered, their questions rapid and relentless. Did you expect this reaction? What did you want to prove to Pugachiva? Aren't you afraid of being called cruel? Ksenia paused, steady and calm. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I spoke what needed to be spoken. History will decide the rest. With that, she turned and walked on. Each word traveled swiftly into newswires, becoming headlines of a different kind. Meanwhile, near the stage, European guests clustered, buzzing in excitement about what had unfolded. One politician remarked, "The Russians have always spoken directly. Now, I've seen it with my own eyes." A diplomat with silver hair added, "There's a quality in this woman Europe has been missing for a long time, the courage to call things as they are." Alla Pugachiva lingered on the stage, surrounded by a few familiar faces, while the hall absorbed the shock of truths laid bare. What would come next from these titans of culture and courage? The night was far from over. A scandal erupted in Paris. Ksenia Sobchak took a stand against Alla Pugachiva. The echo of their confrontation resonated louder than any song. Who spoke the truth? The journalist or the diva? Ksenia briefly paused by a cafe where late-night patrons still lingered. A young couple, glued to their screens, eagerly discussed the live broadcast. Excited, the woman exclaimed, "Look." She said it right to her face, no one would dare. The young man nodded, realizing the weight of those words. It wasn't just about hits or accolades but the raw power of truth spoken loud and clear. Ksenia caught whispers of their conversation but remained outwardly composed. She understood that what had just unfolded was now common knowledge, a tale for the streets. Turning down a quiet alley, the noise around her faded, offering a moment of clarity. She saw the faces, Alla's tense expression, Galkin's confusion, and the room frozen in shock. It felt more like a trial than a performance, with the audience as jurors whose applause rendered the verdict. Ksenia realized that tonight's court had vindicated her voice. Yet, she knew this wasn't the end. New articles, accusations, and attempts to tarnish her name would come. But there would also be fresh echoes from those who resonated with her words. She raised her eyes to the Parisian sky, almost black with a scattered sprinkling of stars. Beneath their icy gaze, a wave of fatigue washed over her. Yet it was the fatigue of a righteous battle, the kind that follows a fight you can't afford to shy away from. She pressed onward, clutching her coat tightly around her.
There was no levity in her stride, only determination. The first reactions started pouring in even before she reached her hotel. Parisian outlets rushed out breaking news, brief articles laden with striking headlines.
François wrote, "The Russian evening turned dramatic. Sobchak accused Pugacheva of treachery."
Mont's approach was more cautious, a heated exchange at a charity gala, differing perspectives from Russia at the heart of Paris. Social media buzzed with excitement.
Video fragments circulated at lightning speed.
A clip showed Ksenia declaring, "The motherland isn't for sale," with the caption, "Moment of Truth."
Another showcased Galkin's bewildered expression with the line, "The songs are over, the words have run out." Comment threads exploded with reactions. "Wow! I never thought someone would dare to say that face to face. This is Pugacheva's fault. Why did she even bring it up?" The atmosphere crackled with tension and debate. But the evening's fallout was just the beginning.
Ksenia knew she had touched a nerve, igniting a conversation that would not be easily snuffed out. As she navigated the streets of Paris, each step echoed the stakes of her bold confrontation.
What would the next day bring? Would the brave light shine through, or would shadows of doubt creep back in?
Only time would tell as she continued on a path steeped in uncertainty and potential. The stage had set itself again, and the world held its breath for the next act. Just moments ago, a storm erupted on a stage in Paris where two icons faced off and one shattered the silence like never before.
Have you ever witnessed a moment so raw, so unexpected, that it left even the most seasoned voices speechless?
When Ksenia, uninvited yet commanding, confronted the legendary prima donna Alla in front of Europe's elite, no one saw it coming. The words spoken were so bold, so piercing, they cut through the polished veneer of the evening like a blade, leaving the audience stunned and mocking quiet in their wake.
Even Maxim's usually confident smile faded into an uneasy grimace. What exactly did Ksenia say? And why did it shake the very core of this glittering gathering?
Previously, the world buzzed with reactions under the phrase "Homeland is not for sale," captioned simply, "Moment of Truth." Alongside it, a bewildered expression on Maxim's face with the caption, "Songs ended, words ran out." Social feeds exploded with comments, disbelief, shock, praise, scorn. No one expected anyone to speak so directly to Alla, and many blamed her for stirring the pot with those rehearsed speeches. Yet, amid the clamor, one thing was clear: Ksenia had become the centerpiece, stealing a spotlight she never officially sought.
Ksenia was relentless, but undeniably right.
Voices rose against her, calling her harsh, a provocateur, yet no one could remain indifferent. Her phone buzzed endlessly through the night. Messages flooded in from Moscow to the heart of Europe. Some applauded her courage, bravo, a historic moment. Others warned, brace yourself, a storm is coming. At a small hotel, the young receptionist, a man with a single earring, greeted her with a knowing smirk.
He'd seen the clips circulating online. He handed over her room key, whispering, "Tonight, the whole city talks quietly about you."
In her room, Ksenia shed her coat and sank into the armchair by the window. The laptop screen blinked with flashing news headlines racing by as if the world was trying to cram a whole week's chaos into a single night. She silenced her phone and finally let the silence settle. Outside, Paris breathed its usual nighttime hum, cars gliding past below, lights flickering against the dark. But for Ksenia, everything had shifted. The words she'd spoken now belonged to the world, alive on their own. She caught her reflection in the glass, tired, weary, yet her eyes burned with an unshakable resolve.
Tomorrow promised fresh waves of turmoil.
But tonight was permanent. In that rare stillness, a simple thought emerged: sometimes, all it takes is the truth. And truth, once spoken, does the rest.
Morning came noisy and relentless. Newsstands, still struggling to unfold fresh papers, swarmed with readers' eager fingers.
Front pages displayed scenes from the charity gala, sharp contrasts between Ksenia's calm, focused face and Alla's lowered eyes, the microphone a weight she seemed reluctant to bear. Reporters scrambled to retell the scene, how the crowd fell silent, the final applause hesitant, how Maxim sat like a lost child confronted by an adult's rebuke. Some labeled it a verbal duel, others a moral reckoning, but they all agreed on one thing: the night had changed everything.
What fueled this fierce confrontation? And more importantly, what happens when tradition faces unfiltered truth? The unfolding story promises more shocks. Stay tuned.
Earlier, she leaned against a stone balustrade, palms pressed firmly, eyes fixed on the shimmering water below.
The reflections of bridge lights danced like flickering sparks in the night.
In that moment, she saw a metaphor, light breaking through darkness. The darker the night, the brighter the spark.
Yesterday, she thought, I wasn't arguing with Alla. I was challenging her choice.
And millions heard that challenge. Now, let the world decide who holds the truth. Inside, there was no triumph. Only the weight of duty fulfilled and the quiet calm of someone who had done what needed to be done. Her steps echoed steadily as she walked back, each one filled with unwavering confidence.
The night in Paris was no longer just a glamorous fundraising evening.
It became a lesson, a powerful reminder that words can change the course of history. This story reaches its close here.
Its echoes will linger far beyond this moment. What do you think about what happened? Your thoughts matter because through them, our shared memory is built, a collective story shaped by each voice, each perspective. The air in the grand hall was thick with anticipation as Ksenia Sobchak entered. She didn't arrive as a mere guest, she commanded the room, moving like a river, past tables adorned with delicate glasses glimmering in the dim candlelight. Artistic whispers filled the space, mingling with the rich scents of expensive perfumes and pastries, creating an atmosphere charged with energy. As the orchestra played gentle warming notes, she took her time, absorbing the environment. Her dark blue dress flowed seamlessly, reflecting her poise. With her hair pulled back and a striking bracelet catching the light, she walked with purpose, exuding a sense of calm authority. In an unexpected twist, this empowered presence was a metaphorical fire, not of chaos but of clarity. Across the room, the visibly anxious figure of Alla Pugacheва took the stage to the gasping silence of the audience, a room filled with dignitaries and artists alike. Sobchak felt the tension build as Pugacheва, one of Russia's most recognized voices, began to speak.
But something felt off, the confidence she once radiated was tempered by uncertainty, as if her words struggled to reconcile with their English delivery. It was in this moment that Ksenia unexpectedly stood, drawing the crowd's attention as she declared, Alla Borisovna, let's drop the masks.
Speak your native tongue.
Daring questions hung in the air like swords ready to fall.
Why was she urging Pugacheva to embrace her roots while surrounded by a sea of foreign faces? What was the true cost of speaking one's truth in a foreign land? As Pugacheva hesitated, the room inhaled collectively, teetering on an unsteady edge of silence. Sobchak's call ignited an inner conflict within the audience, each person weighing their own identity against the performer on stage. What would happen next? Would Pugacheva rise to reclaim her voice, or would she falter under the weight of expectation?
Meanwhile, the world outside buzzed with life, taxis whizzing by, store lights flickering, a stark contrast to the charged stillness of the hall.
Yet within Ksenia, a wave of resolution began to swell.
She glanced at the gathering of reporters outside, their murmurs a tumultuous tide.
What awaited Pugacheva was not merely a performance but a reckoning, a splash of reality amid the theatrical ambience. As she prepared to take her final bow, a young reporter approached, and the question hung heavy beyond the conversation, what will your legacy become? With a small, knowing smile, Ksenia responded simply, loyalty. With that, she exited into the crisp Parisian night, the sounds of applause fading into echoes of responsibility. At that moment, she became aware of the new life her words would take. They no longer belonged to her, but to those who would grapple with their meaning. As her phone buzzed relentlessly, signaling the delayed reactions of the outside world, she felt that strange veil between her and it, thickening with every moment. Why did this sense of duty settle on her like a cloak? The headlines emerged, hinting at a tumultuous narrative unfurling. Scandal in Paris, Sobchak confronts Pugacheva. Who speaks the truth? These questions lingered in the air, charging her fall into the night's embrace. Would she stand for what was right, or would the world return to its comfortable silence? The drama wasn't merely staged, it thrummed with the heartbeat of a vivid conflict between loyalty and freedom, echoing the very essence of what it meant to be seen and heard in an unforgiving landscape. What awaited? Would the stage become a battleground for honesty, or would the shadows deepen around her? The answers seemed elusive, swirling in the dim light of the cafe nearby, where young lovers discussed what they had witnessed, caught up in the ripples of what just transpired. Earlier, the room had fallen into an intense silence. Jewelry softly chimed with every subtle movement. Programs stopped rustling.
Heads turned sharply, only to pretend they were scanning the room for a waiter. These small actions carried a raw human truth, our habit of sincere pretense.
Ksenia didn't reach for the microphone.
Her voice alone commanded the space, gathering every ear effortlessly, relying only on the weight of history and memory. Then she spoke quietly, deliberately, as if speaking the names of the departed, refusing to let even a single syllable fade into the chaos.
Alla Borisovna, she said, her tone steady and clear, please, let us drop the masks. Speak in Russian, your mother tongue. To be ashamed of your language is to betray the memory you have sung for so many years.
For a moment, the stage and the crowd wove together into a dense thread of silence. It was that rare kind of silence where you can hear the footsteps of power shifting, like the parliament moving its stance. Alla Pugacheва tilted her head slightly, as if listening to the pulse within herself. She tried to respond with a smile, but it flickered, turning into a question without an owner.
Ksenia stepped forward, but not on the stage.
She respected the boundary. This wasn't a takeover, it was an appeal. Her calm voice was her weapon. You were the voice of the people, she said. Not a figure of speech, this was a duty. The people carried you not just metaphorically, but with tickets, their hopes, switching on their TVs just to hear your song. The country never closed its doors to you. It opened them so wide that the draft of your music stirred every kitchen, every square. You left by your own will. That was your choice. Why then, from afar, make us believe the door slammed in your face? Her words were not harsh, but they laid firmly on the floor like carefully placed furniture.
No whispering filled the room.
Doubt crept in like shadows across faces always present when words suddenly sharpened the air. You moved to a land where they too shoot, Ksenia continued.
That is tragedy, not a garnish for your speech. But why do you not measure freedom there by the same yardstick you apply to us here? Freedom means responsibility, not a fashionable jacket worn for a night in a new city.
Far back in the dim booth, Maxim shrank deeper into his seat, not from fear, but from recognition. Those words weren't shouted. They hit all the deeper because of their calm weight. A man accustomed to stage courage now resembled someone who heard his own echo for the first time and didn't recognize it.
Ksenia held her stance firmly. No insults, no cheap metaphors denting the air. Only facts. Only memory.
A hush fell over the room, delicate jewelry chiming softly.
Someone stilled, folding their program with unnatural care.
Another turned sharply, only to pretend they'd been watching for a waiter. In these subtle gestures lives undeniable truth, the truth we all try to hide behind polite facades.
Ksenia didn't reach for a microphone.
Her voice alone was enough to command the space, to draw every ear like gravity itself. Then, softly, with the precision of naming the lost, she spoke.
Alla Borisovna, let's drop the masks.
Please, speak in Russian, your mother tongue. To be ashamed of your language, that is the true betrayal of the memories you have sung for so long.
The stage and audience seemed to weave into one tight thread of silence.
A silence so rare you could hear the cautious footsteps of even those in power. Alla Pugacheva tilted her head slightly, as if feeling the beat of her own pulse. She attempted a smile, but it faltered, folding into a question without an answer.
Ksenia stepped forward, yet stopped short of the stage's border.
The line was clear. This was no assertion of dominance, but a deliberate appeal.
Her voice stayed calm, but within that calmness rested undeniable force.
You were the voice of the people. Not just a phrase, but a sacred duty. She reminded the hall, the people lifted her up not with empty words, but with their tickets, hopes, and the ritual of turning on their televisions just to hear her song. This country never shut its doors to you.
On the contrary,
the doorways were thrown wide open, so wide that the breeze of your melodies swept through kitchens and city squares alike.
You left of your own accord. That was your choice. But why, from afar, insist we believe the door slammed shut on you?
Ksenia's words fell like solid furnishings set floorwise, careful, deliberate, resonant. The room held still, no whispers rose. Shadows of doubt flickered across faces always present when speech gains sharp clarity. You went to a country where they are also shooting, she continued quietly, and that is tragedy, not a poetic flourish.
Yet why, there, do you not measure freedom by the same ruler you bring here to weigh us? Freedom is responsibility, not a fashionable jacket worn for a night in a foreign city. From the dimly lit box, Maxim's form shrank further, not from fear, but from recognition. Those words, free of shouting, hit deeper than any scream could. The man known for his stage bravado now resembled someone hearing their own echo for the first time and not recognizing it. Ksenia held her ground unwavering.
There was no insult, no dent made by cheap metaphor, only raw texture, only history laid bare. In a dramatic exchange, the tension in the room thickened. Ksenia noticed how Russians had an exceptional talent for speaking plainly. Her eyes witnessed it firsthand.
A dignified diplomat commented, "This woman embodies the courage that Europe has long lacked."
On stage, Alla Pugacheва remained, surrounded by familiar faces, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. They tried to comfort her, yet silence enveloped the room. Pugacheva's gaze remained fixed ahead, the realization dawning that the moment had slipped away, the audience was no longer hers.
Meanwhile, Maxim Galkin fidgeted in the corner, desperate for an escape, blocked by blinding camera flashes and surging crowds. He wore the expression of an actor suddenly stripped of a role. Outside, Ksenia slung a light coat over her shoulders. Though weary, it was the kind of fatigue that follows fulfilling a duty. She knew her responsibility had been met. As she neared the exit, a young man with a camera caught up to her. He asked with no preamble, just one word for the viewers. A smile graced Ksenia's lips as she responded, "Loyalty," before walking away, leaving behind a corridor alive with whispered conversations and hurried footsteps. The Paris night met Ksenia with an unusual stillness, the city carrying on as usual. Shop lights shimmered, taxis sped by, and snatches of French conversations floated from the windows. Yet, to her, all this felt muted, as if a thin veil lay between her and the world. She stepped into a square bathed in the soft golden glow of the streetlights, inhaling the cool evening air. The applause still echoed in her ears, but it was no triumphant applause, it weighed heavily, like a reminder of responsibility. She knew that the word she had uttered had taken on a life of its own, separate from her, belonging now to those who would repeat, discuss, and debate its significance. Her phone vibrated incessantly in her bag. Messages poured in, congratulations, warnings, reactions. Newsfeeds flashed headlines, "Scandal in Paris. Sobchak versus Pugacheва. A louder Russia than ever." Who told the truth? The journalist or the prima donna?
Ksenia paused at a small cafe, where late-night patrons lingered at tables. A young couple, glued to their phones, dissected the live broadcast they had just witnessed. As she stood there, what crossed her mind? What hidden truths were waiting to be unpacked in this vast sea of opinions? Perhaps more startling than the spectacle was the question that lingered, in a world where words hold power, who truly controls their narrative? As she pondered this, her heart raced, caught between the past and the profound weight of the present. The night was far from over, a storm of thoughts brewed within. What would the fallout be for her country and the voices vying for the truth? The uncertainty hung heavy, waiting to reveal its hand. Just moments ago, a stunning confrontation unfolded in front of a stunned European audience. Ksenia Sobchak, seemingly unannounced, boldly confronted the legendary Alla Pugacheва, an icon embraced by millions. What she said silenced not only the prima donna herself but even Maxim Galkin, who sat nearby, frozen in disbelief. Few dared to speak with such blunt honesty, and the aftermath still reverberates. What happened that night in Paris? Why did one woman's words ripple louder than any applause or praise? Prepare yourself, this story hides far more than meets the eye. Previously, we saw Ksenia holding her ground, her voice calm but devastatingly precise. She refused to let false narratives cloak reality. Alla Pugacheва struggled with awkward English, her speech faltering amid heavy silence, and then, a glass's sharp scratch echoed through the hall. Ksenia rose, not in anger but with quiet authority, insisting the legend speak her truth in her native Russian. The room's atmosphere shifted, as if a veil was lifted. Tension curled thick in the air, and an invisible line had been drawn. Maxim Galkin's nervous glance betrayed his inner turmoil. No cheers followed, only the weight of unfiltered truth. Now, the world watches as this moment explodes online. Though Ksenia wasn't the announced star, she stole the spotlight entirely. Social networks buzzed like a hive, punctured, hundreds of thousands engaged, quoting, debating, defending, or denouncing. Many called it a humiliation for a queen of the stage, others hailed it as the triumph of fearless truth. Surely,
This confrontation was more than entertainment, it had become a symbol. But what drove the woman behind the words?
Ksenia sat quietly in her hotel room, a cup of strong coffee barely touched in her steady hands. Outside, the city pulsed with indifferent life, unaware that its heart had been shaken the night before. She thought about those who would watch the video far from glittering halls in small towns, where old songs still fill the air, and sincerity is not just a memory. Those were the voices she wanted to reach. No pride swelled within, nor bitterness, only crystal-clear purpose. As the evening unfolded online, heated debates ignited everywhere, politics clashed with morality, some dissected every phrase, others sought out the raw emotion beneath. Still, the truth of that night resounded, carried by thousands of voices across the digital landscape. Drawn to the quiet solitude of the riverside, Ksenia stepped out. The cool wind carried hints of water and the faint scent of gasoline from distant boats. The air was crisp, pure. Leaning on the stone railing, she gazed at the shimmering reflections of bridge lights dancing on restless waves. It struck her, light is always more visible against darkness. The deeper the night, the brighter the smallest spark becomes. She whispered to herself, I wasn't arguing with Alla. I challenged her choice. And millions heard that challenge. How far will this spark travel? What will come next from those haunted by this rare moment of unvarnished truth? The night silence holds its breath, ready to reveal. What did Ksenia really mean by confronting not just the legend, but the very decisions shaping a nation's voice? And why did this exchange unsettle even the most seasoned figures present? The next chapter awaits, where the emotional undercurrents swell into a storm. Stay close, there's more to uncover.